Hey, what's up everybody? In this video tutorial, we're going to be showing you how to bring your Pear cam in and place that and constrain that and do everything it is what we have to do with joints in order for it to work properly in our automata. This is assuming that you are done and you have created everything from our video tutorial so far. So you can see we have our box, we have our axle, we have our crank handle peg, we have our shaft collars and follower rods and followers. We have all sorts of stuff in there. But basically, everything is ready to go according to that video tutorial. The other thing I'm going to have you do is within our core training folder, go out to Automata resources and you're going to be seeing these Automata assembly information drawings. You're going to see that there are two sets. All right, obviously we're working on pairs, so have the pair and eccentric cam information working drawing in front of you because this is what I'm going to be referencing. All right, so jumping back here into Fusion, let's go ahead and get started. So if you're one of those people that watch my video tutorials on how to bring all this stuff in, sort of the mechanism parts of it, I'm going to have you go in there and actually undo something. All right. So last time we brought our follower rods in and we applied our slider joints to them and we made them act the way that they were supposed to. I'm actually going to have you go in and delete those. All right. So I'm going to find my two slider joints. I can see that this is slider 29 in my case, and I can see how when I go to highlight it, we can see how it's a darker blue than the other. All right, we know which one it's talking about. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to delete that. All right, my second slider joint I can see is right here, so I'm going to right click and I'm going to delete that. All right, so when I do that, I'm just going to come over here to the follower rod and I'm just going to pull this off of the box. Okay, there is a reason why I'm having you delete them, just to make sure that we're all starting at the same point. All right, it's like a reference point when we're starting to figure out joint limits. All right, so what I'm going to do is taking a look, I can see we have these followers at the bottom. All right, I want those just to disappear for a little bit, so we're just going to turn them off. So over here on the left in our browser, I'm going to come down here until I find those followers. Okay, if you're having a problem finding these over here in the browser, remember you can always pick on it. Okay, just like so. Maybe we can grab it. All right, and that should be giving you sort of this barber pole sort of line that's underneath the actual component itself. So I'm just going to come in here and turn off the eyeballs here to turn the visibility off. All right, I'm doing that because I want to see the bottom of our actual follower rod. All right, so I'm going to come up here and go to joint. I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to look at the bottom of this. I'm going to come right here to this joint origin right in the dead center. I'm now going to be flipping this over, coming here to my rod guide. I'm going to find that joint origin right in the center. All right, so that's coming in. All right, it's looking good. The problem is I want to switch to our motion tab and make sure that that actually is a slider. And I can see the animation is correct. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK. So that's our first slider. The second one, we're going to do the exact same thing. Coming here to the base of this, go to the dead center. That's going to be our origin. Flip this over, come right here to the top of our guide, okay, and find that origin right there. I can see when that comes in. Remember slider from last time, so check that out. Slider's good. We're going to say OK. All right. So now that we have that done, now what I'm going to do is come over here. Okay, I'm going to find my two followers. I'm going to turn the visibility on those. Okay, and now they're showing up. All right, so what we have to do once we have that done is we actually need to bring in our actual cam. All right, so I'm going to come here to my data panel. All right, and I'm going to use my Pear cam. I'm going to drag that over the line, bring that in. Okay, I'm going to grab this by the grip, pull this up off the origin. And before I get out of this, what I want to do is I actually want to rotate this. All right, I want the lobe of our Pear cam to actually be pointing down. All right, so I'm going to look at this and find this dial. I'm going to go ahead and just spin this where it's going straight down. And in my case, all right, that's going to be going down 180 degrees. I'm going to go ahead and say OK. All right, so my orientation is correct. Now I'm going to come up here, find my joint origin. I'm going to come and flip this around. Look at the back side of this. I'm going to come right here to the top of that hole and select that origin. I'm now going to come right over here where the actual axle is at. I'm going to pick that joint origin that's right there. Okay, we can see now that that pear cam has come in. The issue is that this is not a rigid, and we do need for that to be a rigid. Okay, I'm not done with this joint yet. I'm actually going to go back and pick on the position tab, and I'm going to look at this, okay, using this front view. I'm now going to use my arrows, and I'm going to pull this over where it's pretty close to the dead center of this. Okay, I can see we can probably nudge it a little bit more to the right, so I'm just going to say, hey, this is 1.35. I can see that is almost dead center. That's looking pretty good, so I'm going to go ahead and say okay to accept that. And now that pear cam is right there inside on the axle, and it's going to be below our follower rod. All right. So the next portion of this is we want to take the follower rod and the follower, and we want to push those down and have the actual follower rest right on top of the cam. So for this, we're going to have to understand a little bit of math. Okay, so I'm going to be jumping over to this drawing. Here's the information that you need to know. From the top of our box down to the dead center of the axle, that is a distance of 2.25. All right. The thing is, if we take a look at our follower, here's how this was constructed. It's 0.25 from the top, all right, and this is just a straight line, a straight edge, okay, and then it goes into our curve, okay. This arc has a radius of 0.25. So total from here to here, all right, is going to be a dimension of 0.375, okay. So now we have that done. All right, now we have to look at this side. We can see that the square hole goes down into the follower, and that's going to be a depth of 0.25. So doing a little bit of math here, from the bottom of the hole to the bottom of the follower would be 0.375 minus 0.25, okay, which would be a distance of 0.125. All right, so 0.125, all right, is the distance that we need to know what that is from there to there. All right, so that's super important. So you have to remember that. All right, the other thing is that we can get a couple things from just taking a look at the cam. All right, so the distance from the center point of our hole up here to the top, okay, would be a distance of 0.75. So it'd be 0.75, okay, from the top down to the hole. All right, so that would be our minimum displacement distance, and then our maximum displacement distance from here to here would be 1 plus our radius, which is 0.375. So that would be a total distance, okay, of 1.375. All right, so just taking a look at numbers, we have to understand what all the measurements are on these parts, and that's going to help us understand where I'm coming up with these numbers here in just a minute. All right, so back into Fusion. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and find this first slider. Okay, we can see that this is slider 31. Okay, we can tell it's slider 31 because we're just hovering over it, and you're going to see that this is going to be a darker blue color, okay, than the other one that we saw over here. So I'm going to right click here on this first slider. I'm going to come down, and first I'm going to be picking on Edit Joint. What I want to do is I want to grab the arrow, pull this down in this direction here. All right, so we're grabbing the follower rod and we're pulling it down. We can see that that is a negative direction. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I want to bring this down negative 2.25. You're going to see that that is going to be the dead center of our axle. We saw that number earlier in this dimension right here. Okay, so we brought it down to the dead center. Now what we have to do is we have to start figuring in the other distances we need in order to get to the top of our cam. One of those distances was that 0.125 that we calculated earlier for this little piece right here, right, between the bottom of the hole and the actual top of the arc, or the bottom of the arc. The other thing we have to understand is how far it is from here to here, okay? And we see that that's 0.75. Okay, So in Fusion, what I would be doing is saying negative 2.25. I need to add that 0.125, and I also need to add my minimum displacement, in this case for a Pear cam, which would be 0.375. Okay, so once I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And I just realized I typed in the wrong dimension. That's okay. Let me show you how you can fix that. So I'm going to go back into this slider. I'm going to right click and pick on Edit Joint. And yes, some of you are probably screaming at the monitor. You're right. It was 0.75, not 0.375. Now let's say OK to that. Let's look at this from the front view. All right, and we can see that that follower is resting right on top of the actual cam. All right, so what I'm going to do is, and you don't have to do this, but what I'm going to do is come down here. I'm going to find this side. I'm going to turn this off and look at this from a right side view. And if we zoom in here, we can see that that follower is resting right on top, okay, of that cam. All right, so put this back into the home view. I can come over here and turn back on my side. All right, and that guy is basically ready to go. All right, so now that we have that, all right, what we're going to do is start figuring out what our edit joint limits are. We're going to figure out what our joint limits are. We can go in by picking on edit joint limits. All right, so looking here at the front, okay, I'm going to come up here to our slider. I'm going to right click. I'm going to come down and pick on edit limit joints. All right, so right now that's resting right on top of our cam. All right, and that's kind of the low point this is going to be, because when the lobe comes back around, it's going to be going up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick on rest. I'm going to say leave it at 0. We don't want to offset from our current rest spot. Okay. Now what we also want to do is figure out what our maximum displacement is. Okay, for our Pear cam, we can figure out our maximum displacement on this by coming out here, all right, and figuring out what the difference would be, okay, between 1.375 and subtracting 0.75 from it, all right? All right, I'm telling you to do that because it's 1.375 from here to here, and it's 0.75 from here to here, all right? And when we do the math on that, okay, you're going to see that that is 0.625. All right, so back into Fusion, okay, what I'm going to be doing is coming up here, I'm going to be going to my max, and I'm going to say the most that this is going to be 0.625. And you can see the follower rod go up. All right, it's anticipating that at some point this lobe is going to come all the way around up here to the top, and it's going to be able to go to that maximum. All right, so we've just established the rest and the maximum. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is just say OK on that. All right, so we're ready to go ahead and see if this actually works. All right, so when we go to do this, up here in Assemble, we have something called Enable Contact Sets. So if we have pieces and parts that are close together, all right, it's going to be sort of making those, touch and realize that there's a contact surface there. So I'm going to go ahead and pick on Enable All Contact. Okay, so once I do that, now what I'm going to do is come here to my crank handle. I'm going to pick on this, and hopefully we're going to see how that follow rod is able to, follow right on top of the cam if we hit the crank handle. All right, so if you want to reset the crank handle where it currently was at the beginning, all you have to do is come out here, find Revolute in Joints, and if you haven't figured this out, joints are all underneath the joint folder. Okay, is come down here and find Revolute. I'm going to right click on this, and I'm just going to come down and say go to home position, and then we're going to find our crank handle back where it was at the very beginning. All right, so there you go. That is how we bring a Pear cam in. All right, please note the orientation on the Pear cam is pointing down. All right, so that means the numbers I just gave you are only going to work, all right, if this is pointing down. All right, if it's going into an up position, then things are going to change, and you're going to have to figure out what your rest, okay, your max, your minimum, all that stuff is. All right, but there you go. That is how you constrain the Pear cam into your automata.